what was it, August of last year, I resigned from my position to pursue a wonderful opportunity with an organization that I used to work with, Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County. So it's wonderful to see so many familiar faces here. You guys all look great, and it's wonderful to be back here. Thank you very much. I'm just gonna go through quickly some of the stuff that we do with the neighborhood centers and some of the stuff that I've been up to since you guys have seen me last. Then I will hand it over to our development director, Chastity Dillard, and she will tell you a little bit about the history and some of where our funding comes from. And then we will introduce our new executive director, Rachel Rockwell, and she will tell you guys all about her amazing life and amazing story. So, so we'll get into the slides that I've got prepared for you. So, like I said, Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County is where I'm working now. We are a local nonprofit agency that works with young children and families. We have 4 departments of programming at the neighborhood centers. First is our early childhood education, so that's all like preschool and daycare. We have school-age development programs, so that's programs for school-age kids that are maybe a little bit too old for after-school care, but not quite into high school yet. And we have programming for adults and parents and targeting families as a whole. And we've got programming for community engagement, so getting the residents that are in the neighborhoods that we work really involved and engaged with the community as a whole, with each other in the neighborhoods and in the neighborhoods outside of their own. So the approach that the neighborhood centers takes is a little bit different than maybe some of the nonprofits that you might be familiar with or you might have heard of. There's kind of two ways to kind of deal with some of the problems that you might find in a community. The first path is focusing on the neighborhood's needs, deficiencies, and problems. And that's sort of the traditional or common approach. A lot of the organizations around, I'm not going to name any names, but it's right in the title that they're really focused on an individual crisis or an individual problem. But what we do is we look at a community's assets and their capacities. We look at the positives of the people in our neighborhood, and we try to encourage them to help them develop the assets that they already have. So what we do is relationship focused. We build relationships with families. We're not focused on somebody's crisis or their problems, because then what does that tell them? That tells them that we only value them for their deficiencies, that we only value them for their problems, right? But we're only focused on them for their problems, and then when they don't have that problem anymore, you lose a connection with that family. So what we do is we look for long-term commitments to the families to help them provide stability. We like to be there for them on their best day, and we're there for them on their worst day. We're really just a community asset. We're right in the neighborhood where they live, and they can come see us for anything that they may need help with, or if they want to come celebrate with us, we're there for them for that too. We really put an emphasis on the families and the family unit and connecting families with other families in the neighborhoods to help build a cohesive neighborhood, to help build that social capital between people in the neighborhood. And a lot of the stuff that we do, again, because we're not focused on one particular issue or one particular crisis, we're able to adapt to the needs of the community. You know, communities evolve and they change, people come and they go, and different people have different needs. And so, because of the way that we're organized, we're able to be adaptive, and we're able to kind of change what we're doing to meet the needs of what is going on at the current time. So one of the focus areas that we have is early childhood education. We have 7 early childhood education classrooms between our 2 locations. And that goes from infancy all the way up to preschool. We've got 4 classrooms at our Pheasant Ridge location just down the street here off Foreman Trek. We've got an infant room where people come, for regular kind of child care for their infant. And then we've got a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-year-old room. And the 4-year-old is really that pre-K, that kindergarten readiness program. And so the kids, they come to us from 6 weeks old and stay with us all the way up until they're ready for kindergarten. And we really focus on education and getting these kids prepared and ready for to start kindergarten, to start grade school. A lot of times what you see with some communities and some neighborhoods, that struggle a little bit, that, you know, a lot of the kids, when they go into kindergarten, they're not prepared. They haven't had that sort of routine of, you know, how do you stand in line? And, you know, how do I sit down and be quiet while the teacher's talking? They've never had to do this before. So that's something that we really focus on, is getting kids ready so that they can start their education, you know, kind of on an even keel with everybody else. All of our programs in our early childhood education are accredited by the state, and we receive the highest quality rating that the state gives out. So we have a 5-star rating for our programs. We've got the best kind of pre-K education that you can get in the state of Iowa. And that's something that we're really, really proud that we can offer for these families. Then we move on to school age. So after a kid has gone through our early childhood education and they've moved on to school, if they're going to one of the schools in our neighborhoods, like Mark Twain, Grant Wood, Alexander, or Gardner, we run the after-school programs at the school. So we provide that kind of child care after school while working families are at work until 5, 6 o'clock when they can come get them. And we're located at the schools. We operate right in the gym. I think, you know, nowadays, I think, you know, when I grew up in the 80s, you know, there was what's called a latchkey kid. You know, that school let out at 3 o'clock and you ran home to go play. But now, you know, that's kind of a thing of the past. And so every school now has some sort of after-school program, after-school care in the schools. And so that really kind of gets kids that are from kindergarten to about 5th, 6th grade that have, you know, somewhere that's safe and positive that they can be after school. And then in middle school, we have programming for kids that are probably about that 6th, 7th, 8th grade range. We have a program that's called YELL, Youth Engaged in Learning and Leading. And actually, one of the programs that we did, we partnered with Oak Knoll to do a can drive. So you guys were very, very helpful. The kids at the end of the school year wanted to take a field trip down to Fun City, but that wasn't in our budget. And so I actually reached out to Steve and Bruce, and they said, yes, we have a recycling thing. Talk to Mary Palmberg, she'll get you squared away. And so Mary was wonderful enough to organize it for us that the cans that got donated, the kids came, we picked them up, we took them down to the can shed, and they raised, I think it was somewhere around $260, $280, somewhere in that range, so that they could go down to Burlington after the last day of school and have a nice field trip down to Fun City and play the rides, and they loved it. It was great. Another program that we have for the middle school age kids is a program called G World, which is a program for young girls of color. And that program actually targets kids that are middle school and all the way up into high school. And then another program we have for high school kids is a program called YES, which is called, that stands for Youth Empowered to Serve. But it's more of a pre-employment program. So what we do is we give them, they go through some training on how do you write a resume, how do you do a job search, how do you fill out job applications and these kind of things. And it gets them ready to get a job. And so then, once they've gone through the classes, then we actually partner with businesses and agencies around town, and we place them in sort of an internship where they get paid to do, I think it's about 6 weeks to get some on-the-job learning. And then the goal of the program then is then after that sort of internship, that the place where they were placed would offer them a job, a real job. And so these kids that are 15, 16, 17 years old would have an opportunity to have their first job and graduate high school with some employment history and knowing how to really be a productive employee. And so you can see we work with children from the day that they're born to the day they graduate from high school. We've got a program for them, and many times we will have seen not just a kid but a whole family that goes, that starts from our early childhood, moves their way all the way up through middle school and high school, being engaged with the neighborhood centers. And then if they're so lucky, they can sign up for some of our adult programming. One of the biggest things that we do in that area is our family support department. And as you see up here, this lady here is at one of the area mobile home parks doing an event with some of the families that are on her caseload. And what the family support workers do is they help work with young parents, well, any parents don't have to be young, but parents that have kids that are 0 to 5 years old, and help work with the child's development, help the family kind of place goals, and work to achieve their goals and try to help to get them stable and get them ready to be productive parents. Some of the other stuff we do is adult education. We've done ESL classes in the past, where teaching immigrants and English language learners, English. And one of the things, like what I was talking about earlier, is how we're adaptive to the neighborhood. When COVID happened, the schools had shut down, and they gave every kid a laptop to take home so they could do homeschooling. And from the family support department, I was hearing from a lot of our workers that a lot of those parents, they had no idea how to use a computer. And so they've been given this computer, but they don't know how to use it. I mean, they don't even know how to turn it on or use the mouse. So what we did is we developed a computer class here. And we got 6 computers, so we had 3 computers put out in each one of our lobbies that allow them to have access to the internet whenever we're open, and they can come and they can print. A lot of times for people that are applying for assistance need to print off documents like pay stubs and these sort of things like this. And every job application these days is online now. And so having access to the internet is very important, but also then being able to use a computer has become sort of a really crucial part of our society these days if you're trying to get ahead. So we developed some computer learning classes and developed access for computers, and that's sort of an example of how we adjust to the needs of our neighborhoods. When we started in the 1970s, nobody was looking to use a computer, but things changed, and so we changed right along with it. And one of the other programs that we do is working with Iowa Works and doing job fairs around town to help people find employment. And as a matter of fact, even during COVID, as you can see, and there's Chastity, we did our job fair outside, wearing masks, because people still needed to get to work. And so we found a way to do it. And if you look real closely at this picture, you'll see Josiah back there trying to get a little extra help for EBS. So we're all over the community. We're working with, like I said, from kindergarten to adult. From infancy to adults. We're in the community everywhere. And the final leg of what our programming is our community engagement piece. We do a lot of neighborhood events in the neighborhoods just to kind of help build community in the neighborhoods where we operate. And we have a lot of community partners that we help with. Like I said, one of the goals is to sort of engage the families with the larger Iowa City community. Here you'll see an event that we have called Neighborhood Cleanup. And there's Caitlin Clark came out to help us clean up the neighborhood and make everything kind of look nice and get rid of some of in the springtime, do some spring cleaning around in the whole area. We had Hawkeyes coming and volunteers coming from everywhere to help clean up. This one over here was just sort of a neighborhood event. We had a barbecue, and we have a bike program for young kids to get them bikes and teach them safety and how to ride around on bikes. And you can see the fire department came out to help as another one of our community partners. And this was a family support event that we did in one of the neighborhoods where the Children's Museum came out just to have some activities for the kids to play. And so, we engage with entities all over town like Oak Knoll and the Hawkeyes and the fire department and the Children's Museum to really help connect the people that we work with in our neighborhoods with what's around us. Because a lot of times, when you're in a lower income family, you don't have the means or the time to really kind of go out and explore everything. And so it's really helpful to try to help build these connections with these organizations and these entities so that they know what's out there. And so that's it for my piece. I'm going to hand it over to Chastity, and she'll tell you a little bit about our history.
Thanks, James. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about our history. 2023 marks our 50th anniversary. We started in 1973, so we've been here for 50 years. Before I get started, since it's been a long time, I want to ask, is there anyone in this room that might already have a connection to the neighborhood students that might have a story that you share with us? Go ahead.
My girlfriend works there. I think most of you guys know her. A story, well, there's probably too many stories that I know so far from her just coming home and telling me, but I think recently the Hawkeye football team came and visited.
Yeah, the Hawkeye football team came and visited our Mark Twain and our Alexander
I don't know if you guys remember Bea from Dining. She also works over at the neighborhood centers with us.
Someone else over here.
Do you need a microphone?
Tell us
No.
again where Pheasant Ridge
If she
is.
would hold the microphone a little bit
Oh,
closer.
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me?
Now we're
Okay. I was trying to yell over the microphone. Okay. So you said, what was your question, ma'am?
Where is Pheasant Ridge?
So Pheasant Ridge is off of Mormon Trek, behind Fairfield. It's on Roberts Road, Fairway, the grocery store right by in that area over here. And then we have our Broadway Center off of Broadway Street on the other side of town. So as I was saying, oh, is there another one?
Oh, I was just to say, I read with children at Pheasant Ridge after school, after I retired from teaching, and I just really enjoyed that so much. That was really fun. It was just more recreational reading.
Yes. So what was your name, ma'am?
At Pheasant Ridge.
At Pheasant Ridge. So she said that she was able to read stories to some of our early childhood kids at our Pheasant Ridge Center back in the day. Yes, ma'am? Talk about families? I'm going to come closer to you. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's not many men in families? It depends on the family. We do serve a wide range of single parents, whether it be male or female, mothers or fathers. We have a lot of families that do have a traditional family unit. So it just depends on the families. They come from all parts of the globe. Usually when people walk into our doors, we like to welcome what we call new Iowans, newcomers to this area. They just need that extra leg up so that they can navigate this new world. We work with a lot of immigrant and refugee families because of that. Were there any other questions before I dive into the history? Okay, so the Neighborhood Center, as others said, as James said, was started in 1973. And as we've been talking about, we're very adaptive. We're a grassroots organization. What happened is in the Mark IV area, Mark IV apartments, but now known as the Pheasant Ridge neighborhood apartments, there were a group of family, groups of family, groups of residents that were just concerned for what was going on with their kids. When kids have nothing to do, they get into some not so good things. They might run around, they might vandalize, but they wanted to find something for their kids to do. So what we did is we partnered with the school social work at that time, and they came in with residents and they created the neighborhood centers. We talked with the managers at the Mark IV apartments, and they lended us a 3-bedroom apartment, bless you, so that we would be able to start doing after-school programs. So that 50 years ago almost has transpired into what we have today. So our funding structure is very wide. We have federal grants, we have local grants, we have our early childhood and our before and after school programs for fee of services, but for the most part, all of our programs are free to our families and youth to make it the most accessible as possible. And James mostly covered this, but we are in several neighborhoods and several schools, mobile home parks. We are in traditionally Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty, and we have been in Hills as well in the past. As James was saying, we're unique because we don't focus on crisis. We want to be as adaptive as possible. In the 80s, when there was a lot of people coming into our town and our community from Southeast Asia, we were able to adapt and serve those communities. In the 90s, when a huge influx of people, refugees and asylees came from Sudan, we were able to help those individuals. The same with families from Central and South America in the late 90s and early 2000s, all the way until very recently, beginning 2010s, when we had a huge influx of families coming from the Congos. So we love to make sure that as people are walking into our doors, that they are able to see happy faces that are going to allow them to just get the tools and resources that they need to be most successful when they're navigating a new area like this. So my piece is very short. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to our newest leadership, our Executive Director, Rachel Rockwell.
This is a good-looking group. James was right. I don't know how he left you. But we've got him over at Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County now, and we're so glad. He is a great asset to our community and to our organization. I am less organized than James and Chastity. I don't have a PowerPoint to go along with my discussion, but I am loud, so hopefully you can hear me back there. So my name is Rachel Rockwell. I just started as Executive Director for Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County in July 5th of 2022. So I don't know, it's like 4 or 5 months now. One of the things that attracted me to that role is that the real grassroots beginnings of the organization, and that those grassroots efforts continue almost 50 years later, where we're really looking to serve the neighborhood and to empower the people in the neighborhood, to learn from our direct community about what's needed, and to also have leaders emerge from those neighborhoods, and they become our employees, they become our families, they become our financial supporters as they grow into their own lives. One of the things that was very exciting as I was interviewing for this position was being able to visit the different centers. We have, as James and Chastity explained, we have the Pheasant Ridge location over here on this side of town, and then another location at Broadway. But also I was able to visit a number of the schools that we do programming in. And the diversity of our staff and the diversity of the families and the children that we serve is like nothing I've ever seen before anywhere in Iowa. I think that that is something that we are very proud of as an organization, and I feel like the thing that we're most proud of is how we have been good neighbors wherever we've been for almost 50 years, and we look forward to becoming, continuing for the next 50 years to be good neighbors wherever we're serving. So I'll tell you just a little bit about myself, since you guys didn't get to be part of the interview committee for this role. We'll see if you think they might have made a good decision or not. If you think they didn't, I don't want to hear it, but if you think they did, just let me know. So I was born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the same year that Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County became an organization, way back in 1973. I grew up in Cedar Rapids. I had a pretty happy childhood until I became a teenager, and I don't know what happened. You'll have to ask my parents. I kind of just went crazy. I decided that school really was not where I wanted to be, and that Iowa was just a horrible place to live for a teenager. Because of that mindset as a teenager, I got into all kind of mischief, and both of my parents prematurely grayed as a result of that. But I kind of pulled it together once I turned like 30, and decided to use all of that energy that I had, and also I decided to use all of those feelings and emotions that I had as a young person growing up in Iowa to figure out how I could help other young people in Iowa. And so I moved to Des Moines in my late 20s, and when I was right around 32 or 3, I decided to start a nonprofit organization in Des Moines that would work with youth that kind of felt the same way that I did when I became a teenager. Maybe they felt like they didn't belong. Maybe they didn't feel like they had a good neighbors, or a community where they felt like they had a place, or maybe they just couldn't see where they were going to fit. Some kids these days don't connect with your typical junior high or high school student. They're just not into sports, or they're just not gonna, theater or the arts is not exactly their thing. They just don't know who they are yet. And so the nonprofit I started was for those kids who just didn't quite know where they belonged. And I really thought about what kind of supports, what kind of environment would I have needed when I was a teenager to help me to stay out of some of the mischief that I got into. And so ever since then, I've been involved in the nonprofit sector. I've been doing business development, organizational development, coaching, strategic planning for organizations, and educational programs in communities. In 2013, I had a dream to visit East Africa, and life just kind of helped me move that dream ahead. I thought maybe in 5 or 10 years I might make a trip, and but I was able to travel to Tanzania and volunteer for a couple of nonprofit organizations there. My experience, that was my first experience traveling out of the country, and I traveled solo, just by myself. I flew into the airport in Dar es Salaam, which is in Tanzania, which is a city that has, I think, close to 6 million people living there, and almost none of them spoke English. And so that was a huge adventure for me, and I really found out a lot about myself during that trip, and a lot about what I wanted to incorporate into the work I did wherever it was in the world. Some of the things that I learned there is that people from very different backgrounds, whether that be by race, or in Tanzania they have 120 different distinct tribes and tribal languages. So it could be by your tribe, or it could be by your country of origin. In Tanzania, there are folks that live there from Asia, from Europe, from the US, from India, and there were Muslim and Christians and Catholics, and everybody lived together in this very harmonious and peaceful way. So what I learned is that even though people might have very different upbringings or might have different cultural practices, that they can live together in peace and harmony. And I really wanted to understand how that was possible, and to bring that back to my community, or to any community that I've lived in. I ended up, after my first visit, going back just 4 months later. and I spent about 8 weeks on my second trip to Tanzania. Then I came back to the US and I was thinking, okay, well, what do I do with all of this information? I really appreciated the way that families came together to support each other when they were in crisis. They came together to celebrate. I really appreciated how neighbors stopped and took time as they were walking to the store or walking back from work. They would stop and take time to talk to each other. They just wouldn't say hi and wave. That would be disrespectful. They would stop and they would ask, how are you? How are you today? How was work today? How is your sister? How are your grandchildren? How's that old knee that's been giving you trouble? And they would just really show that they cared for each other, and that time that was spent on engaging socially was really what held people together and held that community together. So I thought about, like, how can we replicate that in our communities where we're so divided. We're divided by every single thing that we can think of dividing ourselves by. Age, race, where we're from, the neighborhoods we're living in. How can we come together and really celebrate each other, celebrate our differences, and work towards having a more peaceful existence? So what ended up happening is I couldn't figure out exactly what that would look like here in Iowa. And one of the organizations that I had volunteered with, the first time I went to Tanzania, had called and invited me to come back to Tanzania and live on the island of Zanzibar with them and help them to implement a strategic plan that I had helped them put in place when I volunteered. And so guess what I did? I sold everything I owned, and I took my 10-year-old at the time, who I had been homeschooling anyway because he was one of those kids that just didn't quite fit in and had some trouble in schools, but was very intelligent and could learn. So I took my 10-year-old with me and we moved to Tanzania. So we lived there for 4 years, between 2014 and 2018, and I continued to learn and observe and celebrate this culture, which I feel like is an example of who we all are, really at our roots. Because in Tanzania, if you are a history or taken some anthropology or read some great anthropology books, which I think a few of you probably have, is the cradle of civilization. And so that culture and that love and that peace and that working together that culture has to be part of the oldest culture of civilization. And so it's like really, really going back to our roots of how we can be and interact and be at peace. Unfortunately, my time in Tanzania came to an end. My son turned 14 and he decided he wanted to play football, go to high school, and be an all-American teenager. That he had just missed out on that experience for too long. And then my father passed away. So my mother had never lived by herself. She had celebrated over 50 years of marriage to my dad. And so my son and I decided that we would come back. He would go to high school, he would play football, and we would be with my mom and his grandmother in her time of grieving. So I have to say it's 2022 now, and that 10-year-old is now off to college. He's at Iowa Wesleyan and he's playing football just like he had imagined, and we hope that he has a very successful college career in spite of the fact that he had been homeschooled by his mother for many years of his education coming up to that. I, most recently, since I came back from Tanzania in 2018, I worked with the school district in Cedar Rapids for a little bit, helping them to implement a community school model. And a community school model is where you take the school and you look at the teachers and you look at the parents and you look at the students and you look at the neighborhood around that school and you look at the businesses around that school and you say, what does this neighborhood need? And why can't we try to provide those needs right here in the school where the students and the parents and the teachers and the neighbors have access to that? So I did that for a year, and about halfway into that year, the Greater Cedar Rapids Community Foundation, which is an organization that gives out millions and millions of dollars to nonprofits every year, had a job opening for a program officer for a new fund that they had developed. The city of Cedar Rapids and Lynn County and the school district had put some money into a pot that they wanted then to be granted out into the community to prevent youth violence and community violence. And so I spent 3 years between 2019 and 2022 developing and implementing a community violence reduction strategy in Cedar Rapids. That strategy was to bring together law enforcement along with social services and nonprofits and grassroots community leaders to come together and form a coalition to work with young people in particular to help them find other ways to resolve conflict rather than violence. So some of the things that work when all of those entities come together are implementing restorative practices. Also, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is just helping young people understand why they feel the way they do and why they want to respond in a violent way, and what what their bodies and their minds are telling them is not actually probably what is best for them, and how to kind of frame things so that they can make better decisions. As a result of my work at the Community Foundation in those 3 years, we were able to attract over $2 million in new funding to the community to support the violence intervention work. And so there are now 5 people that are hired and working in doing community outreach and violence prevention work in Lynn County as a result of that new job and that new fund at the Community Foundation. And I'm very proud of that work. We were able to reduce violence victimization rates for one group of 15 to 24-year-olds by 50%. And so, yeah, that work means a lot to me. When I saw the role at NCJC, Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County, we say that for short, NCJC, I was reminded of my first nonprofit work at the nonprofit that I started in Des Moines. And I felt like, even though I wasn't really looking for a job at the time, I was pretty comfortable and content with where I was at, I felt like I had to put in an application. That I saw this posting for a reason, and that they just might need my leadership and my experience, and that I should give it a shot. And here I am. So, what do you think? They did a good job, right? All right. So one of the reasons I was excited about coming here tonight and meeting you all and talking to you all, the first reason is because James speaks of you all and these beautiful facilities with very high regard and very often, and he has since I started in my role at Neighborhood Centers. to the extent that he brought me here for a tour a couple of months back. We are looking at expanding into a third site in the Towncrest neighborhood, where we would have 3 locations. That neighborhood is one that has a lot of need, and we're working towards a plan for what that would look like. But when I came here, I just was amazed. But you're our neighbors. And so we are neighborhood centers of Johnson County, and it's, I think, our job to make an effort to meet our neighbors, to get to know our neighbors, but also to hear from you about what can we do to be better neighbors. How can we be a part of this community and this neighborhood that you are proud to know, a neighbor that you would be proud to invite back to see you again, and proud to tell others about in this community. So some of the things, if you guys have ideas of how we could be better neighbors, we'd really love to hear that, because we are really at a pivotal point. 50 years. In 2023, it's our 50th anniversary as an organization. Neighborhood Centers has a brand new executive director and a brand new associate director. And so we are really at a point where we need guidance, advice, to be able to envision what is going to be happening in the next 50 years. And so I feel like there's a lot of wisdom in this room, and I'd really love to absorb any of that you would like to share. So that's all I have to say. Any questions that you have for any of us, we're glad to answer, and any advice that you have for us as to how we can be better neighbors, we are all ears for.
I can come around with the mic if anyone has questions or comments or concerns.
Do you work with any of the local churches? Do they, I think our church serves food over there one day a week or something like that.
You're our best partner, St. Andrews, right? Yes. I think we have some connections at a couple of other churches, but St. Andrews is our #1 best partner. You guys allow us to use your beautiful, beautiful space when we have all staff trainings. We have close to 80 employees, and so when we bring all of our staff together, who sometimes work at the schools and work at the different centers, we don't have space to even do that, and the church has been so gracious and so helpful with any time we've needed that. And then the volunteers that come over and are serving food are just lovely people, so happy to be there, never stressing our staff out, really just the ideal volunteers, I would say. So please pass that along. We try to let them know that, but I don't think there's ever enough thank yous. So would you recommend we expand our partnerships to more churches? Is that? Okay, I see some heads nodding. Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering if you have any connection with the Broadway marketplace, with the people who are selling their own products and people from the neighborhood.
Yes, so they're developing that whole area in that inside plaza, right? James and Chastity both know more about that project than I do.
I would say yes. One of the creators, Angie Jordan, was previously on our board, so we're very well connected with Angie. And it is one of our greatest partnerships. I know James can talk about his connection with it as well. But we are very excited to be working with that new district to further our connections in that community.
Yeah, and they have actually, the city and the businesses in that area have formed a self-supporting municipal improvement district, and I'm actually one of the board of directors for this new organization that is looking to really transform that Pepperwood area over there where kind of Econo Foods and Kmart used to be, if any of you remember where that is, and just bringing some new economic development into the area and revitalizing that area so that it becomes sort of a destination place, just like you were saying, where people in the area can sell, whether it's food or goods that come from their culture, and have a diverse market in that area. I think what you're referring to was called the diversity market that went on there several Saturdays over the past couple summers, and that has been so popular that we decided to start this improvement district and start really putting some money into really revitalizing that area in that model. So yes, we've been very involved. Thank you. Oh, all right. Does anybody else? I can come back. Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
In your early discussion of the community and how people interacted and so forth, it reminded me of growing up on a farm in a small community, and we were like that. I mean, you could walk into anybody's house and say, "Anybody home?" And if they were, you would chat. If not, you'd leave again, etc. I don't know when we lost that, but I never had it after childhood. And I'd like to hear from some of the others. How do you foster that kind of involvement with neighbors?
I think one of the things that we do at the neighborhood centers is we try to model that. And so whenever anybody comes in the door, whether there's someone we know or a complete stranger, we try to make sure that they feel welcome, and to make sure, even if there's language barriers or different cultures, that we do everything we can to let them know that this space is for you. And then, as much as possible, try to figure out how we can go beyond that welcoming to make sure that people feel safe, that they feel respected, that they feel cared for. And so just creating that safe space and looking at the environment and making sure that it's a place that people want to be. We're right now really working on looking at our common spaces and saying, like, some of this is really old, from decades ago, or some of this looks a little worn down. How can we make changes to the space that make sure that it reflects how we feel about the neighborhood and about our visitors, so that people will want to keep coming back? So that's a really great question, but I think it really is in the fact that our neighborhood centers, we feel like family within our staff especially, and we feel like family with the children that are in our child care classes and with their parents, and that we just try to, as much as possible, make sure that that family feeling is extended as far out as possible. And that's what you're talking about from your childhood. It's like you're welcome there, and you felt if someone was there, no one was angry that you stopped by without calling. They welcomed you in and have some coffee, and sit down and chat for a while, and you don't have to need anything or anything like that. You can just be here with us. So letting people be who they are and appreciating and celebrating our differences. Great questions, you guys.
Comment.
Yes.
What do you do in the summertime? You've got before and after school programs, but what about all that time in the summertime?
All day, every day with the kids. So yes, we do summer programs, especially for the school-age kids, and they, I'm just so impressed with the programs because they are identifying field trips that are going to work for kiddos from kindergarten up to 5th grade. They're taking them to different educational opportunities. They don't just stay in Johnson County, they're able to explore. They have arts activities, they are able to connect with the museums and just really have a nice balance of regular summer fun, swimming and parks and that type of thing, and then still being able to learn along the way. So our summer programs are just an extension of the before and after school programs, and really so important for parents who work. I don't know, what parents would do without that these days. When I was a kid, I could just run up and down the block and walk to the park and be gone until the street lights came on, but that's not what we do anymore. So. Do you have a question?
Where did you go to college?
I went, thank
What did
you.
you study?
Okay. So I started at Kirkwood College and I got my associate's degree. This is when I was really young. I thought I wanted to be a TV broadcaster. So I studied broadcasting, or journalism and broadcasting. One of my teachers, my instructors there, had the nerve to give me a B. The nerve to give me a B. And I had all straight A's other than that, and so I got pretty upset and decided I didn't want to do that anymore. I graduated from Kirkwood with an associate's degree, and I got a full scholarship to Coe College in Cedar Rapids, and I thought, this was computer science, sounded like I could make a lot of money, and I didn't know anything about it, and there's this World Wide Web thing that had come out and sounded pretty interesting, and I went to Coe College. I was a non-traditional student, so I wasn't living on campus, and I had would have been a 3-year-old child at that time, and I hated computer science, and I didn't like Coe College, and so I decided I wasn't going to do that anymore. Eventually, after a number of years in the workforce, making not very good money and trying to raise a family, I decided to go back to school. And so I went to Grandview University in Des Moines and studied psychology and art therapy. Kind of way different than computer science. Some of us don't know what we're going to be when we grow up until we're grown up.
Where does the funding come from for the neighborhood centers?
So our funding, we have many, many grants that we receive. Some of the funding is from federal funds, some are from state funds. A lot of our dollars come from the Department of Human Services to support the child care for parents who can't afford child care. We have some funding from the Department of Education also to support our before and after school programs and our summer programs. And then we get local funding from the city and the county to support many of our youth programs and some of our building upkeep and that type of thing. So there's probably, at any given time, 15 different grants that we are managing and reporting on, and that is the majority of our funding. Like 90%. We have a small donor base, and that's always very helpful, especially when you want to be creative and innovative about new programming and flexible. It's hard to be really flexible with federal and state grants. They're pretty particular, so.
Do you have any ideas about how we could be involved? No, it's
That is a great question.
What was it?
Repeat it.
She asked, how can we be involved? That's what Kathy said.
So, Neighborhood Centers serves a large percentage of low-income families who are struggling to become upwardly mobile. They're struggling to raise their children and keep their children safe and help them, nurture and grow them into productive and caring community members. That's not an easy thing to do if you don't speak the language, if you are from another culture and you have come to a new country and you have to learn everything from the beginning, or if you're a single parent. And so one thing is to vote for leaders in our state and in our county, in our city, who care about folks who are marginalized or who might need some assistance to get to where they want to be. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. Speak out also. I think that knowing that diversity in your neighborhood and in your community or your city really makes the community much more rich, much more enjoyable for people to live, that it's a good thing, even though it might be something that we're not used to or maybe comfortable with. We'd love for you to join us at our community-wide events that we have. We are having an open house at the Pheasant Ridge location on December 9th from 4 to 6 p.m. Is that right? 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. Thank you, Chastity. We'll have some hot cocoa and some cookies, and we'd just love to see your faces there if you can get out. Hopefully there's not a big snowstorm that day. We also have a community event that we do every year. It's called Harvest Feast. And this year where is it, Chastity? Do you want to?
This year, it's this Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. And I believe it is at Faith Academy, which is over on the southeast side of Iowa City, near our Broadway Center. And it's actually not Faith Academy, it is the SMID development.
Actually, I think they're calling it Parkview East
Yes.
these days. But it's an outreach location of Parkview Church that's located where Slumberland was, there in Pepperwood Plaza. So this Friday from 6 to 8, we're doing a big community Thanksgiving-style dinner, and it'll be held at the Parkview East location.
So I think one way we can make sure that you get invited to all of our different things is if you share your email address or your mailing address with us, so we can make sure we drop a little postcard in the mail for you, or we can send an email to you to make sure you're getting invited. I think throughout the year, we will probably have, since it's our 50th anniversary this coming year, we're going to have probably more and more of this kind of gathering, neighborhood gathering, community gathering. And so just becoming part of our family and a familiar face is huge for us. And inviting us here, we can bring a group of youth. We can bring to come and do some service activities. I think that's something that our youth programs person would love. So if you have ideas of how youth could serve this community, we'd love to hear those. And then, I don't know if you guys like babies, but we have some really, really cute babies. And I think if you just need some snuggle time, that our babies in our 2-year-old rooms would love to put you on the schedule for some snuggle time with some of the kids. We would have to, you know, get you through the volunteer process for that, but that's something that we are really open to and only helps the staff who really have their hands full with these adorable, sweet children. So that's another idea just off the top of my mind. James, do you have other ideas, or Chastity?
You could always follow us on Facebook and always stay up to date on all of the activities and events that we're having and all the ways that, you know, you can kind of be a part of our family, like Rachel's saying. We stay pretty active on there, and we keep updated with all the goings on. So even if you just want to see the pictures of the cute babies, that's definitely a good follow.
You can also come visit us. You can come to our centers if you want a tour. You can come. The kids would love to. They love it when a new person comes into the classroom. You will be a celebrity. So you can do that.
You guys have great questions. We only have -2 minutes left in our time today. Do you guys have any advice for us?
Margaret, did you have a follow-up?
For Liam?
Is there a consortium of neighborhood centers so that you can get best practices from each other?
No.
Well, the neighborhood centers we're all one organization between all the different locations and different buildings that we have. But there is sort of, and actually we've been talking in the past year a lot, so there are other nonprofit organizations in the area, and some of the funding streams like you're asking from, there's like a county grant that is for organizations that work with youth. And we've been meeting a lot recently and talking about how can we kind of have a consortium, how can we work together instead of like being separate entities, because we found out that a lot of these different entities, we work with some of the same families, actually a lot of the same families. And so we've been talking about, I think Rachel was just involved with a conversation with the executive director of one of these other organizations about maybe a shared facility somewhere where we could, you know, where multiple organizations could render services. And another one of the big things is, like I said, that funding stream. It's a single county funding stream that we all kind of compete, you know, for. And how can we work together instead of competing against each other in that arena? And so those conversations have been happening, and that's something that we're really looking forward to in the next 50 years.
Thank you, everybody, for your wonderful questions and feedback and having us here tonight. We really appreciate you.